Hello, my name is Dejan Boshkov, Grandmaster from Bulgaria. Today we shall talk about another way of using the rooks, and this is the so-called rook lift. I'm starting again from the beginning. This is the game Ikonnikov as white, Dmitry Ikonnikov, not the famous Grandmaster, but another one, also not a bad player, by the way, against Nikolaitis Ioannis. They played in Russia in 1997. The opening is the so-called Sozin attack. It's a very, very sharp opening. White is simply developing his pieces in an aggressive way, and he's aiming for a long castling, and then when black castles short, he would like to kill him immediately with attacking there. The game that happens usually is very sharp, with tactical sides for with tactical chances for both sides, and usually it's important who is going to be the first one to start the attack, and usually he is the one who mates. So in that game, white chose the move rook g1. It looks slightly mysterious as the rook is behind the pawn, but in fact white is preparing the so-called rook lift. That is a very typical idea for various Sicilian setups, and this is one of them. White can also start with the move g4, and then after g5, and the rook can also come via g1 to g3 and h3, and that's the idea of the rook lift. We are going in front of the pawn chain. The rook is gaining power because of that, and he starts to attack the pawn on h7 immediately. But rook g1 is also a possible idea to do that. Knight d7, that's quite typical for black as well. The knight is leaving the vulnerable position on f6, so he would not be pushed back with the tempo by the white pieces, but also that knight is going to jump on c5, eventually exchange this mighty piece on b3, that bishop g4, knight c5, g5, given an access of the queen to the h5 square, and white is already preparing the maneuver rook g3, rook h3, and queen h5, and this is his main chance for gaining good attack in this position. The other ideas are connected with various jumps of the knights on d5 and f5, even sacrificing a piece or two in many cases. It appeared that the standard plan with the advance of the pawns like g5, h4, h5 is too slow, as black is also having his share of chances on the other side of the board. Namely, he can take and then push the pawns, and he is also quite fast, and he can also exchange a pair of knights on d4. So the most dangerous idea for white nowadays is considered to be that rook lift. Let's have a look at some samples now. After g5, b5, queen h5, I'm going to show you mainly successful ways of implementing the rook into the attack for the first player. But of course, black also has his chances. Do not consider this lecture as a refutation of black's strategy. This is not so. There is a lot of theory, and black also had found good ways to fight this rook lift. I just wanted to show that, to demonstrate that the rook, the seemingly inactive rook on g1 is always very useful, either via g3 to h3 or via g4 to h4 for an attack against the h7 pawn, and sometimes even from its initial place. For example, now in that game, Ikonnikov took on d4. The move b4 can be met by with knight takes c6, with the idea that if black takes queen back, then bishop d5 is coming, and as rook on a8 is attacked, if black takes, then this knight is coming immediately into the action. The knight is attacking the bishop on d8, and there is an additional problem that that knight is also heading to the f6 square, which will let free the rook from g1, as black is forced to take on f6. If he takes with the pawn, it will be mate. Let's say something like this. Or if he goes the other way around, king h8, the simplest is rook g7. Suddenly the rook is mating already. And if he takes with the bishop, then g takes f6, g6, queen h6, knight e6, the only defense against queen g7 mate. But now comes the rook along the g line. It is transferred to h4, and we have a very good sample of rook lift to h4 that will leave black helpless. So taking counter-attacking with b4 is not a very good idea in this position. Probably the best that black can do is to foresee that white is really what is white really heading for, and to try and to shut this rook activity with a very typical Sicilian way. g6, queen h6, rook goes back, freeing the f8 square for the bishop. Then the bishop would like to go to g7 to find Cheto itself, and not only to exert pressure along this diagonal, but also to defend there. For example, now let's say that white continues with his plan with the rook lift. That's really very dangerous for black, but he's saving himself with the help of bishop f8, queen h4. Now let's say bishop goes back is one very good idea for black if he wants to play for a draw. The point being that rook h3 now will be met with the move h5. And as white cannot take, the queen is hanging due to the pin. His pieces on h3 and h4 look rather silly. And there is another way to play this position, apart from going back bishop e7. Black can also try just to develop his initiative on the queen's flank, and after rook h3, now to play h5 and to use white's own pawn on h6 to stop the activity of his heavy pieces. So he just sacrificed bait of material, but because of this pawn on h6, the activity of the pieces is significantly lower than it was supposed to be. They are not really attacking anything on h7, and the king can comfortably hide behind that pawn. Say bishop e7 can be played, and okay, after that he can even take the knight on c3. So that comes to show you a good strategy to fight with a rook lift idea. In that game, after queen h5, though, black took on d4. Bishop takes d4, and now he also exchanged the other bishop, the bishop on b3. Sorry, with knight takes b3. Two important games were also played here. Not only two, but many important games actually. But I just wanted to show that one. b4, knight d5 to demonstrate the dangers for the second player. Knight takes b3. Of course, black is not really happy to allow that bishop to go to d5, and there will be two raging bishops against the king, besides the queen that is ready here to attack, and there will be the g6 idea to blow black's castling. So knight takes b3 is a must. A takes b3, e takes d5, and now comes a shocker. That's queen h6, very strong move, threatening mate in one, and of course black cannot take as he's going to be mated, let's say, like that. He can sacrifice everything, but that's simply mate. And the only defense after queen h6 is f6, but then g takes f6. Suddenly the white pieces became free. The attack on g7 is unstoppable, and in fact, white is taking back the material. Soon he won in the game from Beek against Santos. There is another way for black to treat the position after instead of b4, he can also simply develop with bishop b7. And now the best way for white will be to rook the lift via g4, not via g3, because in that case he can have problems after rook ac8, rook h3. There will be the shot bishop takes e4, suddenly defending the pawn on h7, and using the fact that knight takes e4 will be refuted after knight takes b3. There is a mating threat on c2, unstoppable. Back to the game. We said that black took on b3, knight takes b3, a takes b3, and now he played b4. There are a couple of more successful samples here that I would like to show you for the first play. After rook d8, rook d3 was lifted this time, not the one from g1, but the other one is going to h3, as that one can be used in a different way. After e5, knight d5, this was decisive already for the first play. Knight f6 came again, very typical idea. The pawn on h7 is hanging, so he's more or less forced to take it. G takes f6, G takes f6, king f8, and now he simply took on e7 with a decisive attack. Actually, the game did not last too long. Queen h6, king e8, bishop c5. The rooks have excellent activity. He cannot take back on c5 as it will be mate in two. So this means that black is completely helpless. Bishop e6, rook g8, king d7, rook takes d6, and white won a lot of material. That's the game Servat against Wolitsky that was played in the Argentinian Championship. And one more sample. After g6, queen h6, f6, rook d3. Again, this rook, it was important this time that we leave this rook, as we will see that the rook from g1 have another mission. Black now played rook f7, g takes f6, bishop takes f6, but here comes the mission of the rook from g1. He took simply on g6, takes. The king cannot go in the corner as rook h3 and bishop takes f6 with mate is coming. And if he goes to the other direction, then simply bishop takes f6 followed by rook h3 and rook h8 mate. Finally, after the move rook g7, queen e8 check, the lifted rook from d3 delivered the final blow with rook h3, and black resigned here. We see that in these lines the rook lift it depends on many things. The rook can be lifted via g3, via g4, or the other one via d3. But in all the cases, this gives us a lot of additional possibilities, additional options, and a lot of energy, extra energy into the attack. So back to the game b4. Black did not play very convincingly. In fact, he's already lost in that position. He exchanged a pair of effective white pieces, but he also brought a very strong bishop on d4, and white pieces became capable of doing already great things. One thing that white could have done here was that blow, queen h6, that we have already seen. The idea, we know it, he cannot take on h6 because of the mate. H takes and rook takes g5 mate. f6, we also saw similar lines. We just take, and we discover the energy of our pieces. Let's say rook takes f6, queen takes f6, and we are simply a rook ahead. And if e5 in that position, after queen h6, trying to cut white's forces, then the d5 square is freed. knight d5 is very strong, with the idea that white simply wins at least the pawn in that line, and he continues also with the attack, this time with the open g file. Another thing that white could have done in that position after b4 is also very spectacular. First he can jump knight d5, and after black takes, now the move queen h6, using the power of the rook on g1. The point is, as usual, f6, we take back the piece and we continue the attack, this time with opposite color bishops, but of course with open files for the rooks and very active pieces. Black should not survive. Finally, what white did into the game was also very strong. He played bishop f6, again trying to open the g file for his rook. Of course, black cannot allow this. This is going to be mate after rook g7. Queen h7 is inevitable. If he takes with the bishop, that's quite similar. Rook takes g7 and queen takes h7 mate is the threat, and after the only move g6, then queen h6 and queen g7 mate is coming. Finally, if he stays like he did in the game rook e8, white lifted the other rook via d3. That one is going to h3 to deliver mate. Possible line, and a very beautiful one, is if he takes rook h3, h6 only move, and now the southern queen takes h6, letting free the rooks, and this will be mate. C takes b2, king takes b2, queen h8 mate is the threat. He has to take that queen. Rook takes h6, rook h8 mate is the threat, so he has to take on f6, and this is finally it is mate. Note that the rooks did the main job, and they were supported by a bishop and a pawn in the final mating phase. But before that, the queen, of course, did a lot of job. What do we have left here? Yes, after rook d3, black did not take the knight, but he played queen a5. Anyway, rook h3 is coming, and after h6, the same idea, queen takes h6. The lifted rook is delivering the mate, and here black resigned, not waiting to see the line. G takes h6, rook takes h6, and similar like before, the same mate, rook h8 mate. The second game that I would like to show you is the game Timofeyev as white playing against Svidler. It's a very recent game from the Russian Championship 2008, and it was a very spectacular win for the first player. They opted for the pawn-off attack and Caro-Kann, but the arising position is very typical, and in fact, after bishop b4, bishop d3, d takes c4, bishop takes c4, short castling, this position can also arise from the Ninsu Indian, and that's a very typical situation with isolated pawn on d4, and also in that case with isolated pawn, one of the main plans for the white to attack and to use his extra space is the so-called rook lift. That's why I'm showing you this game. So far, nothing extraordinary. Everyone is placing his pieces, developing, trying to get them on their best possible places. Svidler took on c3, that's also known by the theory, but here I believe that he made a mistake. He played the move rook c7, intending, he has a good positional idea, he wants to exert pressure along the long diagonal with queen a8, but the fact that the rook is already on c3 is quite dangerous for him. So most probably he had to opt for h6, bishop h4, bishop d5. This has been already seen in some other games, with the idea to exchange the very strong bishop on c4, but also the very strong rook on c3 that was already heading for the g3 and h3 squares. So rook c7, it doesn't seem that dangerous yet. But after knight e5, some some troubles are already seen. Now bishop d5 again must be the best move, but queen a8 was the initial idea for the second player. However, it is not working tactically, as after bishop takes e6, very strong move, and bishop takes f7, intermediate check, white is winning some material. Let's say king h8, b takes c3, bishop takes g2. White is a pawn ahead, he has the pair of bishops, and he's much better. After, let's say, bishop takes f6, and okay, there is no enough compensation for the second player, but Svidler insisted on his plan, and he played king h8. In fact, this was a novelty for that time, not a very good one, as the king is not really going to the best possible position. Now rook h3 came the rook lift, the rook in front of the pawns and attacking the opponent's pawns, the pawn on h7. There are already concrete ideas to take on d7 and then to attack the pawn on h7 after bishop d3 or queen d3, even better. Queen a8 was played, knight takes d7. And now Svidler, the great champion, Svidler, so many times a champion of Russia, he blundered, he took on d7 with the rook. His only move was to take on d7 with the knight. Still has a lot of trouble. For example, white can proceed with his attack with rook h4, intending to come on h3 with the queen, and then even to sacrifice the rook on h6, take back with the queen from h3 to h6 and bishop d3 to give mates like that, or to leave the other rook. And if king g8, going away from these ideas, bishop b5 seems very strong. Other ways for white to proceed with the attack, they were shown by Mikhail Golubev while he was analyzing that game. Queen d3, the immediate threat of mate on h7, is also not bad. g6, and now he can even afford sacrificing a piece with bishop takes e6. Also, the calm continuation of the attack, rook h6 and again queen h3, should be quite dangerous for the second player as well. For example, rook h6, king g7, queen h3, rook h8, and now maybe even queen g3 or queen h4, heading for the weak dark squares, and he can even try to leave the other rook in some cases. Oh, sorry, now the bishop is hanging on b3. So first he will move back with the bishop, and then he will proceed with that plan. And the lines that Golubev gives after g6 are also very dangerous for black. Bishop takes e6, with the point that if now he takes on g6, there is queen takes. If he takes back on e6, there is queen takes g6 coming, and the heavy piece attacking. That attack is unstoppable. Bishop f6 will be played in case that black retreats with the knight to defend the pawn on h7. And also, if he takes on g2, bishop takes g2, there'll be rook h4 with the idea that rook e8 is met with queen g3. And again, a very dangerous attack. Double attack against the pieces, the bishop on g2, the rook on c7 is hanging, the black squares are weak, and there are constant threats of sacrificing a rook on g7, queen h4, bishop s6, and mate on h8. So we see that he had a lot of problems already, black, and it's not a big wonder that the natural move rook takes d7 was played. However, this appeared to be a decisive mistake, as after the exchange of the only defender of the h7 pawn, the knight on f6, white was already winning. After rook takes h7, Svidler in fact resigned, and this was a very painful defeat for the champion. The line that shows why he resigns is queen h3 check, king on the g file, queen g4 check, king has to go back on the h line, and now the second rook is lifted. The rook on e3 is coming, the threat rook h3 mate is, can be parried only with the move bishop e4, but then check and queen h4. The heavy pieces suddenly were lifted in front of the pawns and they deliver mate. Queen e4 will be made by a simple capture. Black resigned. And we see that the lifted rook has the power of a rook on an open file in many cases.